Pro football today on SportsGrid. It is great to be with all of you as we've had the chance to catch our breath following the June 1st trading bonanza that saw Myles Garrett end up a Los Angeles Ram, Jared Verse, a Cleveland Brown, and the predicted J.Brown move to New England. We're going to discuss all three of those players. We're going to discuss all four teams involved in these blockbuster deals at length, but I'm not going to do it alone. Joining me here on Pro Football Today is Tom Vecchio. Tom, it's going to be great here to go through these trades. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Like you said, the much anticipated Brown to the Pats trade. We all knew that was going to happen, whether it's going to be actually on June 1st, the next day. But the real shocker, the real blockbuster trade was Myles Garrett going to the Rams. Not something that anyone was really expecting. A lot in return, as you mentioned, Jared Verse plus the picks going to the Browns. A lot to discuss, and these teams, all four of them, are all in, I don't want to say dramatically different spots because the Rams are the favorites to win the Super Bowl. We expect the Pats and the Eagles to be firmly in the mix for the playoffs. And then the Browns have a lot of work to do, but there's a ton to discuss.
Yeah, there certainly is. I think, though, we kind of go back to the scene of the crime. That was, this Myles Garrett trade. It broke last week during a Pro Football Today. And, the thoughts are kind of, moving fast and furious. The one thing that has stood out to me in my own reaction and the reaction of others is usually when deals get done, we like to pick a winner and a loser. And everyone, or the consensus, not everyone, but for the most part, the consensus is both teams did well. Oh, you know what? I think they both won the deal. And I think that is respect for Myles Garrett. I think it is an acknowledgement of who he is as a future first ballot Hall of Famer. But what I'm saying is, on its face, the only reason we like this for the Rams is we're so far away from locking in our Super Bowl picks and futures that we're not ready to definitively slam the gavel down that the Rams aren't winning the Super Bowl. Because let's be very clear. If the Rams don't win the Super Bowl with Myles Garrett, this is a bad trade. If the Rams do not win it within the next 2 years, which is seemingly the window they are operating in, this is a bad trade. Yet the market has moved noticeably to push the Rams out, understandably, as favorites. We're going to get to that Brown side of it, Tom, but I really believe we have a situation where the Rams have made a gamble that this is their year, maybe next, and we're all trying to figure out if we believe it will work, but we understand that it very well could, because they were already fantastic and added Myles Garrett to the group.
They were fantastic. They added Myles Garrett. And, frankly, the last time I was here with you talking, we were actually talking about the Rams in a very different light. We were talking about the draft recap and what the Rams did in the first round. And I keep going back to that. And I thought about that. And, it's not just me. I see this Discord, across people discussing, this trade of what the Rams could have done in the first round, of getting you a player to help you this season, as you alluded to, not only this season, but next season, in a very short time frame because of the Stafford health and really just how much left you have with Stafford. Getting another player on top of getting Myles Garrett would have really boosted the Rams to having a phenomenal offseason, because we were talking about the Rams having a disaster of a draft, and seemingly this Myles Garrett trade is kind of just swept that under the rug, and people are forgetting that they drafted Ty Simpson, which no one liked except for like two people. So what they could have done is kind of, that's why I keep thinking like, what they could have done. They could have had another piece to help them this season. So yes, the Rams are now operating in an all chips to the middle type of situation, and they have to win in this next 2, maybe 3-year window at most.
The Ty Simpson angle, Tom, is one that I took myself. And the Rams in trading for Myles Garrett are almost saying, hey, the NFL is going to actually close up shop within the next year or two. So none of this really matters, except that Ty Simpson deal, which is, hey, down the road, it'd be great to have a Stafford replacement. And let me tell you, as an NBA guy, those two timeline things don't usually work. They just don't, right? Sounds great in theory, but instead you're kind of splitting the difference instead of going all in on a direction. And I know some people said that in drafting Ty Simpson, they freed up future draft capital because they didn't have to worry about drafting a Stafford replacement. I cannot stress this enough. The Ty Simpson belief, the Ty Simpson fans, and we all know exactly who we are talking about, okay? Their selling point is, well, Sean McVay's going to get to work with him. Well, guys, Sean McVay could have worked with Talon Green in the 5th round, okay? Sean McVay could have worked with Carson Beck in the 3rd round. If that's what we're doing, if we're just saying, get me a player and McVay will make it work, then we didn't need to spend 1st-round draft capital, 13th overall pick on Ty Simpson. We could have drafted Kenyon Sadiq or Mekhi Lemon or Ruben Bain. That's what we could have done. 100%. And, again, I'm not trying to downplay Myles Garrett. If they just take Ruben Bain at 13, they still have Jared Verse and all these other draft picks they had to send out. Right? So, flatly, the Ty Simpson pick is against the grain of everything else this team has done. And when people try and defend their friends and say if Simpson never plays on his rookie deal, that's a win because it means Stafford stayed around, you're lying to yourself and the audience. That is not a win. That is a major loss and an absolute failure as a general manager and brain trust in the use of a top 15 draft choice. But we know that already. So I couldn't agree more with you on that end of it, Tom. But where we are with this Rams team is every single decision that they make, it's just pass or fail, it feels now. They win the Super Bowl, everything was genius. Do they not win the Super Bowl? Boy, they've set the franchise back. I don't like being that you know this, Tom. I don't want it to be that caveman, for lack of a better term, but that's, I feel like, where we are with the Los Angeles Rams.
And that's really just based on their history of when they, went all chips to the middle to get Stafford, and then they won the Super Bowl. It's like, oh, well, it worked, right? It worked. The process doesn't matter because the results are there. And then when they continuously make trades, high-impact trades, giving up first-rounders, doing this, that, or the other thing, and then the results are there, you can say, oh, well, it's working. But ultimately, the NFL, people are going to be judged on their wins or losses and whether or not they win championships or not. But ultimately, not succeeding is setting your team back to a degree that we don't know yet. Because if you don't win under Stafford and then Ty Simpson doesn't develop, well, then now you're really, really at a loss because you gave up the draft capital that you could have drafted another offensive lineman, wide receiver or tight end, as you said, with Lemon. You could have done that. And then the future draft capital that you're now giving up along with Jared Verse, a younger player. Those things will compound on each other as the years roll on, and then that's what sets your franchise back even further. So if they don't pass-fail this situation, to your point, in terms of winning a Super Bowl in the next 2 or 3 seasons, I don't know how much longer you can keep McVay, because you can't just say, oh, McVay will figure it out. He has a quarterback. He has the players, because that's not going to be good enough at a certain point.
When you say keep McVay, how do you mean?
It's go 3 more years of not winning, and then you're going all chips to the middle every time. It's going to have a breaking point. You may have to move on at a certain point.
Oh, gosh. Well, that's the hottest take I've heard in maybe my life. McVay retiring, I think, is on the board. Okay. Sean McVay getting fired is insanity. Shout out Tom Vecchio. What an open to the program. What an open to the program. Sean McVay on the hot seat. You absolutely heard that here first. It's Pro Football Today on SportsGrid.
Terrible start last year, injured all the way through, didn't have a chance to win that Major League Baseball season. This year, first team to 20 wins. First team to 30 wins, first team to 40 wins. It's all in the Atlanta Braves. Good baseball club lurking around here.
They still have some guys, some starting pitchers on the shelf there that could help them down the road, but the Braves are sitting pretty right now.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Christopher Sanchez is the right call right now. What am I missing? Why is Shohei Ohtani not right there with him? Well, is it the innings, Donnie? What is it? What am I missing here? Because if he qualifies for the pitching title and he throws a lot of innings and he leads the major leagues in earned run average and even whip, like, well, what am I missing?
Pro Baseball Today, only on SportsGrid.
Class is in session. Today, let's talk about the teaser. A teaser is a multi-leg bet where you shift the point spread in your favor. You get better numbers, but every selection has to win. It doesn't matter what you bet if you don't have the insights. Tune into SportsGrid and get ahead of the class.
Hey there, it's your buddy Craig Carton. If you're trying to find out how to get all the great content that me and Tyrone Johnson give you every single day, here's Tyrone to tell you how.
You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and of course, Amazon Music as well. We're at all four.
That's right. It's the Craig Carton Show podcast every weekday morning live at 11, replayed at noon on YouTube and on SportsGrid throughout the country. Check it out.
All right, guys, Pro Football Today. We're back with you right here on SportsGrid. And again, the Rams piece of it to me is, will this team win the Super Bowl? Can we talk, Tom, about their odds for a second? So pretty much half the next closest team is what the Rams are booked at to win the Super Bowl. Do you... And interestingly enough, the second and third teams that appear out of the NFC are actually from the NFC West, right? With the Seahawks and the Niners. I don't think either of us are there yet on June 8th. It's not who we are, and I think that's a good thing personally. But but do you think it is possible? Because I know that you're someone who will sometimes close the door on these things. It is possible that you end up thinking there's value on the Rams to win the Super Bowl.
That's a great question. And, a part of me would want to see training camp, and it really comes down to the health of the 49ers. And that's something I would want to strongly to take into consideration when it comes to the 49ers. Everyone's going to talk about the Seahawks and the Super Bowl hangover and, this, that, the other thing of are they going to be able to repeat what was somewhat of a magical season? But really the 49ers are that interesting piece in the division because they have a lot of international travel this year. They have a lot of, away games. They're going to Mexico City. They're going to Australia. They also have a lot of injuries. So if the 49ers aren't able to kind of tread water and withstand what is a difficult schedule just in terms of travel, they may just be a lost cause this year. They just may be a lost team and would really put Seattle as their biggest competition. And that's what I think it will come down to. If Seattle can at least be good enough and not have a Super Bowl hangover, they will be the Rams' biggest competition, not the 49ers. So I can't get there on the Rams yet, but if you tell me that the 49ers are going to struggle and we're going to have these constant conversations about Kittle and CMC and what we're doing with Purdy and all these things, even though I'm a believer in that offense, if they just can't stay healthy and the schedule's too much, the Rams may have a cleaner path than we realize.
I think the way the division is set up suggests it should be a challenge. I do wonder if maybe the best way to back the Rams is fading that notion. They're even money right now, Tom, to win a division.
West.
Right? Should they really be half of everybody else to win a Super Bowl, but not minus money to win a division? Like, Buffalo's minus money to win a division with the team that represented the AFC in the Super Bowl within their division. So, I think Seattle's going to be a team that people are, maybe people like you and I, inclined to fade, right? Massive pop-off year against the odds, now positioned to be, this is who they are, right? I don't know, again, right? I can see you smiling. I know exactly, right? We're seeing that in the same. And the Niners and their injuries have just, it's who they are. We know who, right? Like, there's no reason to believe that Niners stuff gets better after a legitimate postseason run, right? Christian McCaffrey, you want to dive into the fantasy world, is undraftable, in my opinion, off of the workload that he had. I'm just being, right? Like, their big move was getting always injured Mike Evans. It's like, okay, right? So, it's interesting. I also think there's a world where the Rams are tempting to bet, right? That we have this all-in superpower whose numbers will only grow shorter. And, right, because is anybody going to predict this team to miss the playoffs? Betting them is one thing, right? Like, it's such a big number, how could I not? But miss the playoffs, not really. If Stafford stays out there, right? Like, I think there's a world the Rams become a more than tempting team, despite the number. Now, maybe not, right? At the end of the day, the other side of that coin, Tom, is everybody other than LA has value, because look at the LA number, which I think is also a reasonable thought.
It is true. And, this is one of the situations where, we just flashed the win total of 11.5. If we do see the Seahawks take a step back and the 49ers go through everything, there's a chance that the Rams fall under their win total, but they still comfortably win the division. They could win the division by, 2 games, just because Seattle sits at, maybe 9, maybe 10 wins. But to say that the Rams are clearly better, I think is fair, but I'm just not there yet. I can't get there at the beginning of June, knowing that there's so much to come. We got to remember, last year during training camp, Stafford and the back injuries and the treatment that he was apparently receiving at training camp was this big mystery. And he had a fantastic year last year, as the Rams did. He came out flying. It was never an issue. But those things are only going to come up more and more, considering where they are positioned as Super Bowl favorites.
It's a really good point about the Stafford back injury, because I don't know if this will be perfectly applicable, but sometimes an injury gets overstated. There's value in going against it. You end up right. And then it becomes understated. And now you think about the injury. Now, this nearly worked flawlessly in the Chiefs-Eagles Super Bowl that Kansas City won. If you remember, Mahomes hurt his ankle against Jacksonville, right? It led to Cincinnati maybe closing as a favorite in Arrowhead for an AFC championship game. Mahomes was not fine, but they win the game, right? Scrambles. And I remember telling people, it's going to matter in the Super Bowl. Running away from the Eagles, it's going to matter in the Super Bowl. The only reason it didn't, he hurt his ankle right before halftime. And the halftime shows are a decade long, and he got juiced up with every legal thing that they can possibly juice him up with, and he was floating. That's why he was so good in the second half. He was floating out there. He was seeing 4 defenders. He was living on a prayer. I like the Stafford point a lot, Tom, and it's something that I certainly won't forget, because it's a real worry with an older quarterback. It just is. He's coming off an MVP season, his first ever league MVP. Is Stafford about to rip off a bunch of league MVPs at this age of his career? Likely not.
We also have to remember that Devontae Adams didn't end the season healthy and was dealing with plenty. He's also getting up there in age. And after Devontae, we're not working with a whole lot on offense outside of Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams in the backfield. They have a lot of good, role players and pieces that can elevate at times, but there's no one super, super consistent outside of those two. They could have drafted a wide receiver in the first round.
And Nacua might be a ticking time bomb. Let's move over to the Cleveland Browns side of this trade next. Pro Football Today here on SportsGrid. Kevin Walsh, Tom Vecchio. We're talking about the trades and the woe of it all. We talked about the LA Rams side of it. The Browns piece, Tom. Let me ask you this. Is there, because no one's offering it, is there or maybe you don't like the trade, is there a negative side to the Browns deal, or is this just all positive?
It's positive in the sense that, you get a younger player, you get some picks back. The negative side is the fan aspect. You traded away a franchise cornerstone, so to speak, that was, loved by the fans. And now, I don't want to say it's like, the Browns are punting on it, because we all knew Myles Garrett could have been amazing. He could have won another, Defensive Player of the Year in Cleveland. But the question is, like, to what end? He could have 30 sacks. He could set a record, but it's like, well, they're still going to miss the playoffs. So if you can get a younger player back and assets, I think it's a solid trade for the Browns. But the negative aspect would come from the fans just not loving that you traded away a fan favorite. And that's obviously a very minor thing when it's all said and done.
No, but it's a fair angle. I think the interesting thing, though, Tom, is at least 50% was probably fine with moving on from Myles Garrett.
Sure.
It's my guess. Myles Garrett went real NBA with this whole thing. Request a trade, get paid a record-breaking contract, just get traded the next year, right? Mm-hmm. That's what he did. But he gave the Browns something in that year, which is the single-season sack record. And Browns fans, I think, enjoyed that run. And they, instead of having to hear that they squandered the career of Myles Garrett, right? They reached some high ceilings and saw him move on. And they reaped the benefits of it. I think if you were to offer up a devil's advocate to this trade, it's trading for Jared Verse, prioritizing the player instead of draft picks. Now, I actually like that they prioritized Jared Verse, quite frankly. I don't think the Browns should have prioritized LA Rams draft choices over ready-to-go Jared Verse, who on his own right is worth multiple first-round picks. I think they did a job well done there, but there is a lot of pressure on Jared Verse now to be a multi-time All-Pro, right? That is what they, because that's the math on it, right? I think instead of 2 additional first-round picks, right, or something of the equivalent, I think that they got Jared Verse, and 2 first-round picks get you an all-pro level guy. But they got him young, cost-controlled. So, again, I really like the Verse angle here for Cleveland, Tom, and I think the only devil's advocate that which I might believe is, did you allow these huge decisions to be made by a group of guys who may not be there long term? I don't make that decision, and I'm not saying they need to run Andrew Barry or Todd Monken out of town. Todd Monken hasn't even coached a football game. But if the Browns live up to their numbers, they will be one of the 4 or 5 worst teams in football. And again, and sometimes that leads to, even though it's like the plan, Tom, it leads to fire everybody. Mm-hmm. And that I would not like. I would not like the guys who were given the runway to orchestrate this stuff. It's why I didn't understand the Giants firing Dable. So you let Dable pick a quarterback and then fired him in the middle of it. That's insane, right? Joe, at least I guess they kept Joe Shane. So that would be, to me, Tom, the devil's advocate of it for Cleveland, is that the guys who made this move may not then be around to see it all the way out.
Yeah, I would certainly be inclined to agree with that. And we see a lot of franchises go through this where it's like a revolving door where it's like they're getting rid of one piece but still hanging on to another that the guy that just left brought in, and now not everyone's on the same page, whether it be GM, president of football operations, quarterback. What are we doing with the future first-round picks? You're expecting to have the picks next year in what could be a very strong class, but then is that coach and GM going to be on the same page and all these sorts of things? I think the negative aspect would be, Jared Jared Verse has big shoes to fill. Like people are going to constantly compare him to Myles Garrett, and it's not fair. It won't be fair to Jared Verse. He can have a fantastic career and still never live up to or match what Myles Garrett did, but he could still be amazing. And they need to bring pieces alongside him on defense if they're truly going to build around him as they did and say, this is our new Myles Garrett.
Yeah, I think that Cleveland ultimately has put themselves in a position that they should be excited about. The simple thing, though, is you can't start Deshaun Watson. That was always kind of ridiculous, but now it's really, really ridiculous. A.J. Brown's a Patriot. Next.
A lot of talk has been about sports betting handle being down or flat, right, because of the threat of prediction markets and the growth of them. But we've seen Kalshi actually kind of plateau for the first time in recent memory. Looking at a graphic right now, we've had the spike for the Super Bowl, and then this is usually when things die down. Yes, there's March Madness, but usually sports betting handle kind of goes down over the course of the spring and summer until we get back to football season.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
For Abdul Carter. Hey, son, you want to be a leader? Show up to meetings on time. Don't be late to practice. This guy's sitting there trying to tell me that he's got a problem with Jackson Dart going to a Trump rally when he can't even show up to a meeting on time and he can't show up to practice and he's late? Dude.
Outspoken with Dan Cilio, only on SportsGrid.
This is all about headlines, Donnie. Yep. If we hear, if that noise gets louder as we get closer, then 45 cents is going to be 65 cents, and that's the repricing we're talking about. I don't need Utah to get him. I need people to think Utah is going to go up and get him, Donnie, and that's how you make money.
Prediction Markets Edge, only on SportsGrid.
Craig Carton along with Tyrone Johnson. We got great news for you. CraigCartonShow.com. And Tyrone, what do you get if you go to that amazing website?
Well, right now you can subscribe to our upcoming newsletter. You put in your email address, and then bang, you'll get all the new Craig Carton Show content when it arrives.
Not just that, you also get merch drops, exclusive content, and appearances. So again, one more time, that website is CraigCartonShow.com.
A.J. Brown is a Patriot. Well, we knew that was going to happen. Schefter kind of confirmed that like a couple of months ago. But it did take long enough to where we were like, hey, you think anybody's going to swoop in here? Obviously, that did not happen. Let's start with the trade itself, Tom, because there was a lot made about the Eagles' return. Did you feel that there was a winner or a loser in this A.J. Brown, Philadelphia Eagles, New England Patriots trade?
Ultimately, I'm okay with it really on both sides. The Pats got what they ultimately needed, which is a true number one receiver for a still young and still developing quarterback. And I know they made some other moves on offense in terms of the receivers. They kind of need to bolster that. I'm fine with what the Eagles did. And whether or not the picks come to fruition down the line, from a team mentality and part of the distraction that A.J. Brown brought to the team, cleaning their hands of this situation and moving on, I think is ultimately a win. So even if the picks turn out to be okay, it could still come out net positive for them. It doesn't have to be some blockbuster all-pro players that they end up drafting. If they're just good, solid players, I think this is going to be good for both sides.
Yeah, so I just took a lot of issue with people who said that the Eagles waiting until 2028 for the draft pick made a mistake. I actually think, no, to be honest with you, Tom, and I know how people are going to label this, Eagle fan, I really don't care, I'm right. I think it's the Eagles taking advantage of outdated concepts in this league once again. There's a number of draft charts that people use to come up with the value for what works, and forgive me for not knowing, but there's like the Jimmy Johnson one, but then there's like a second one, and the Eagles often operate on the second one. I think it's one of the reasons they get a lot of deals done. is because sometimes teams are like, oh, this is great for us, and they're just like, yeah, you're getting smoked again. People are like, the further out, add a round on, and the Eagles were like, a first round pick's a first round pick, and guess who's right? The Eagles. When 2028 comes around, guess what? The Eagles have an extra first round pick. Not to mention the potential for Philly to never use that draft pick and make a trade. So I'm not saying that, oh, the New England Patriots got smoked or lost. But the notion that the Eagles waiting for 2028 for the draft pick was a mistake is crazy. Let's be clear about this. There were 3 options then, right? Or I guess there were 4 outcomes here. The 26 first rounder, the 27 first rounder, the 28 first rounder, no first rounder. Some people said the Eagles were going to get no first rounder. They got a first rounder. Okay, boom. So they already did great. The 26 first rounder was the 31st overall selection. Anybody want to take the bet that that'll be the worst of the 3 in terms of where it lands? I think everybody would agree. Maybe you think the Pats win the Super Bowl in one of the next 2 seasons, but Tom doesn't live in Foxborough. And those are pretty much the only people who are crazy enough to think that. Okay, so the Eagles have now, it's either a 27 first or a 28 first. And the immediacy of the 2027 first is interesting. The draft class hype around the 2027 first is interesting. But Tom, don't you think that it is more likely the New England Patriots are better this coming season than the following? I think so. So I think the Eagles, who, by the way, entered this negotiation wanting to get rid of a player, the player desperately didn't want to be there, picked his destination, and the Eagles couldn't trade him until June 1st, dominated this setup here. Everything went on their terms. The Pats wanted this deal done in April. Eagles said, no, you're going to wait 2 months. And that's exactly what happened.
Right. The 2026 pick, not being able to use it or not getting it at 31st, I think that's a win for the Eagles. And, the fact that the wait, we knew where he was going to go. We knew that he was going to go to the spot. Therefore, like I said, you couldn't negotiate openly with other teams. Like, oh, give us a first and a second, or this first or that second, or another first, or whatever it might be. And again, to your point, which I think is the biggest thing, is they may never use this 2028 first round pick. If they have to flip this pick to another team to acquire a player, offense, defense, someone to protect Hurts, another edge rusher, whatever it might be in the far-flung future of 2+ years before the draft rolls around, that pick may never be realized, and they can get a player that will help them now in this championship window. And that's the most important thing. Everyone likes to talk about it as if it's set in stone. So I like it for both sides because it does alleviate the Eagles of whatever you want to call it, a locker room distraction, media distraction, all these sorts of things. But they got back things that people didn't expect them to get back. And the Pats got what they needed, a true stud wide receiver to help the quarterback that's going to be there for the next 10 or 15 years and help the rest of the receivers along the way. Because if the defense is going to be worried about J.Brown, what the Pats do with the other players, that will all be elevated.
Yeah, look, I just think that they've set themselves up here quite nicely. Max Crosby, I'm still not sure he's going to be a Raider. We know the Eagles made a phone call about Myles Garrett. It would be entirely unsurprising to me if that draft pick is not in the Eagles' possession before the league's season starts. So just keep that in mind. We're obviously going to talk, about what this means for these teams. I guess just how excited do you think, Tom, Patriots fans, backers should be about A.J. Brown joining their team?
I think they should be incredibly excited. And what he brings to the team is something that no other receiver on their team possesses right now. And, it's great to see them sign Romeo Doubs, but he's not A.J. Brown. Romeo Doubs is not a number 1 receiver. Yeah. Romeo Doubs is a good receiver, and he's a good kind of role player in what he does. But when he can excel is because the defense is worried about A.J. Brown. If A.J. Brown was not on this team, and it was Doubs, Kayshon Boutte, Matt Collins, Demario Douglas as your wide receiver core, you'd be like, well, Drake May has got to get them open. Now Drake May can have open receivers because we have a strong running game with Henderson and still Stevenson back there. Hunter Henry is the security blanket. A.J. Brown now brings his downfield threat, and now Dobbs can excel in the middle of the field because he's going to be open. So fans should be thrilled that A.J. Brown is there, knowing that they can have a guy with a 30+% target share that Drake May can look to every third down to continue drives, and the other guys can play their part, and thus everyone, a rising tide lifts all ships type of situation.
Yeah, I think the reality for New England, though, is they needed this to get done desperately. So that is one of the reasons the Eagles, I think, were able to dictate the terms of a lot of this. But they got it done, right? There's just some bad takes out there. I don't need to harp on the same person. The Patriots wide receiver core stunk prior to this deal. Now you like it a lot because AJ's your number one. Assuming Booty sticks around, Booty Dobbs, you can get excited about Kyle Williams, right? Like okay, we've got something here. But AJ Brown is replacing a 1,000-yard wide receiver in Stephon Diggs, 85 receptions. He's not is A.J. Brown better than Stephon Diggs? Yes. Is A.J. Brown going to be wildly better than Stephon Diggs was last year? Maybe. I'm not so sure. I mean, again, wildly better? Probably not. So I think that's, interesting when you're trying to set expectations for this whole thing. The other piece, because we're going to get to the Eagles side of it next, New England kind of made this deal when things were fine with Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel, whether people want to admit it or not, is under far more scrutiny than any other coach who, in his first year went to the Super Bowl. And now, not only does Mike Vrabel need to be successful, the A.J. Brown stuff has to be successful. Because otherwise it's more eyeballs on Vrabel and questions as to whether or not he will be in New England long term. And that's just the reality. That's no spicy rumors or anything. That's just very straightforward. There's pressure on Vrabel for the A.J. Brown stuff to work. What does it mean for the Eagles? We'll tell you next. Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. The maybe somewhat forgotten piece of this A.J. Brown trade is how does it impact the Philadelphia Eagles? And I only say that because I feel like most reactions are either about what the Eagles were given in return and what A.J. Brown joining New England means. But the Philadelphia Eagles did lose a guy whose 4-year run in Philly was maybe the single best 4-year stretch of an Eagles receiver in the history of the franchise. So it's noteworthy. I'll start with you, Tom. How do you think A.J. Brown leaving Philadelphia will impact this team?
I think the hot take or, knee-jerk reaction would be to say, like, oh, you're losing a guy that consistently puts up 1,000 yards. That's going to be a big impact. The offense wasn't great last year. Saquon Barkley wasn't great last year compared to the year prior. What are we going to get from the offense? But, I think this opens up a lot of potential simply based on the experimentation that the offense could bring. When you have a wide receiver such as Devonta Smith, who I think is fantastic. He's had over 1,000 yards in 3 of the last 4 seasons. He's your new number one. And this is something that the offense should be, at least the passing portion of the offense should be built around. And then when you draft Lemon and you bring in Dontavian Wicks and you bring in Hollywood Brown, you have players that can play a role somewhat similar to New England, where you have a true number one, but then you have a lot of guys that really do bring some upside. And whether or not Dallas Goedert is going to be playing a long-term role there, I don't think he will. You have pieces that you can work with and true offensive talent. So if we expect the offense to be better just based on natural regression, we expect Saquon Barkley to be better. Again, maybe it's not going to be as high volume of touches, but he will be a little bit better. We know we get from Devonta Smith, you have a great wide receiver talent, and then you have some guys that are trying to prove themselves. Dontavian Wicks, Hollywood Brown. These guys want long-term contracts. They want to prove themselves. So now you have pieces that can rotate in and out. You will always have fresh wide receivers. An injury here or there won't impact the passing game too much because everyone's pretty good, and we're waiting for someone to elevate themselves to be a star alongside Smith.
So, Tom, give me a range of where you think Devonta Smith stacks up amongst the best receivers in this league.
Based on pure numbers, at worst 15, worst 12. But we're not going to push him into the top 7 or 8 at this point.
I agree. Here's my thing. And I think this is when the A.J. Brown stuff had been being discussed by a lot, people about moving on from him, and people are worried about replacing the production. There's 2 things that I think are very, very important to understand. Firstly, Mekhi Lemon is not replacing A.J. Brown. Devonta Smith is. Okay? And that's a very, very big distinction because I think anybody would agree that Devonta Smith can certainly be the number 1 wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles, right? He is a number 1 wide receiver level talent. The other thing is the Eagles having arguably the best wide receiver duo in football doesn't really make sense when you look at how they operate. Just factually. And I'm saying that as a Jalen Hurts guy. So it's very funny that other people haven't been able to reach this conclusion to me. The Eagles want to run the football, right? They want to, certainly, I think, increase the versatility in their pass attack. I think they want to, be more aggressive in appropriate areas, but they're not going to throw it a Joe Burrow amount of times. That just doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? You're supposed to have a great offensive line with a megastar running back, a mobile quarterback. So I actually think we got to a point, Tom, where the allocation of resources was too much in the wide receiver room financially. And I think resetting the deck, and now Devonta Smith is your number 1, and because it extends to the tight ends. The rest of the pass catchers, Lemon, Wicks, Hollywood Brown, Dallas Goedert, Eli Stowers, well, I like that, right? I don't know if any of those individuals emerge as like, oh, I'm clearly the second best guy, other maybe than like a late season Lemon, right, Tom? But I think the Eagles, based on who they are and how they operate, absolutely have enough in the passing game to be the kind of offense they want to be.
I would agree 100%. And again, if we are looking back to last season in terms of offensive line ineffectiveness, offensive line injuries, early in the season, Saquon didn't break off a run longer than, 15, 16, 17 yards in the first X amount of weeks. And he did that 30, 40 times the year prior. So if something that just has natural regression and he meets somewhere in the middle, which you could do in the first week, which will probably happen, along with the Jets having a pick in the first week, which we know is going to happen. The Eagles' pass game, again, can be a spot where you don't need someone to be a superstar. When you have young talent that is ready to emerge, like a Stowers or like a Lemon, you have a little bit of a veteran presence with Hollywood Brown. These guys can now filter in and out, and the effectiveness of the run game increasing naturally will open up more of the passing game for one of these players to eventually step up. And it doesn't have to happen immediately. It can happen as the season rolls on.
Here is the other, most unbiased man in the history of sports media, right? Here's the other side of it. I get annoyed when I hear people talk about how, it's a big year for Jalen Hurts. He's got to prove it. That does bother me, right? For a Super Bowl MVP who's been to multiple Super Bowls, as Dak Prescott gets to do whatever he wants and a collection of other quarterbacks. But I actually find that those conversations are not strictly born out of people undervaluing Hurts. It's born out of the environment the Eagles have created. It's born out of how they moved off of Carson Wentz to bring in Jalen Hurts. It's the reality based on Hurts' contract and the fact that this team now has extra first-round draft capital to their name. So while I don't think Hurts should be playing for his long-term future in Philadelphia, it's totally reasonable to say he is. And that's why I think it was super important to move A.J. Brown and Kevin Patullo, because they have to give Hurts the chance to then be as comfortable as necessary to show, without a shadow of a doubt, he is the guy for the Philadelphia Eagles long-term. We'll see who the guy is long-term for the Cleveland Browns. We'll get back to the Watson versus Sanders versus googly eyes at Arch Manning next.
Class is in session. Today, let's talk about the teaser. A teaser is a multi-leg bet where you shift the point spread in your favor. You get better numbers, but every selection has to win. It doesn't matter what you bet if you don't have the insights. Tune into SportsGrid and get ahead of the class.
Terrible start last year, injured all the way through, didn't have a chance to win that Major League Baseball season. This year, first team to 20 wins, first team to 30 wins, first team to 40 wins. It's all in the Atlanta Braves. Good baseball club lurking around here.
They still have some guys, some starting pitchers on the shelf there that could help them down the road, but the Braves are sitting pretty right now.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
That's for Abdul Carter. Hey, son, you want to be a leader? Show up to meetings on time. Don't be late to practice. This guy's sitting there trying to tell me that he's got a problem with Jackson Dart going to a Trump rally when he can't even show up to a meeting on time? And he can't show up to practice and he's late? Dude.
Outspoken with Dan Cilio, only on SportsGrid.
Well, the talk has been about sports betting handle being down or flat, right, because of the threat of prediction markets and the growth of them. But we've seen Kalshi actually kind of plateau for the first time in recent memory. Looking at a graphic right now, we've had the spike for the Super Bowl, and then this is usually when things die down. Yes, there's March Madness, but usually sports betting handle kind of goes down over the course of the spring and summer until we get back to football season.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Kevin Walsh, Tom Vecchio closing this thing out on Pro Football Today. And Tom, the Cleveland Browns quarterback situation is one that we loosely got into. But there are odds around who's going to be their week 1 starting quarterback. Watson the favorite. Sanders not far behind. Dylan Gabriel and Talon Green are posted. They certainly don't seem to be in contention. Do you have any strong feelings on who the Browns should be, looking to be their lead man to open the season?
Who should be their lead man or who will be their lead man? This reminds me of a question you asked me when we were talking about the Cardinals and their running back room of who's going to be the number 1 running back, who's going to take the first carry for the Arizona Cardinals. I think it's going to be James Conner taking the first carry for the Arizona Cardinals because I think that's what they're going to do. Doesn't mean he's their best running back. For the Browns, a part of me thinks that they're going to start Deshaun Watson because they want to and be like, oh, well, we traded for him. We have the money invested in him, and we're going to start him because he's the veteran quarterback, and that's what we're going to do. Does not mean that's the right answer. That's a part of me thinks that's just what they're going to do. And looking at their schedule, I'm trying to figure out if Sanders doesn't start week 1, when would he start and how quickly would that change happen? They're at Jacksonville, at Tampa, at home versus Carolina. Then they play at home versus Pittsburgh on a Thursday night. If they are 1-3 or 0-4, the Thursday night, they have the mini bye week going into week 5. That's when I think Sanders would be starting if he's not starting week 1, which I think he ultimately should be because Deshaun Watson's not the future. Even if Sanders struggles in the entirety of the season and he's quote unquote bad, you need to go through the process of having a young quarterback struggle to see what you truly have in him.
Yeah. So Tom, I agree about giving the job to Sanders. The Watson stuff actually, I'm watching off field, suggests that maybe he shouldn't be in this league, but I'm not even talking about that in this moment. The notion of Deshaun Watson starting for the Browns bothers me because of how stupid it is. You don't want to use those words all the time, but guys, it is an unacceptable decision if we are being logical as the Cleveland Browns. If I am in that room, Watson cannot start any games. If you are the Browns and I give you right now, hey, you pick first overall or are a wild card team, they'd pick first overall. That's what they would pick. There's not a lot of teams who would. To be very, very clear about that, okay? Like I don't even think the Jets would. I think they'd look to snap a playoff drought and get themselves in the mix, and why not us? Okay? The Browns are, it is at this point reported, enamored with Arch Manning. We don't even know if Arch is going to, 1, be the best quarterback in that class, and 2, come out, but that doesn't matter. They want Arch. And they're accruing of first-round draft capital is to get Arch Manning, okay? Or a quarterback at the minimum. So Watson being better is actually less in his favor. Less, okay? The only world, though, where you don't draft quarterback next year is one of the young guys broke out. And if so, hey, that's a happy accident, right? In the world where Watson carries you to a 10-win season, that is a full disaster. What, are you going to run it back with Watson the follow? No, you're not. No, you're not. You're not doing that. So give Shedeur the job, and if he struggles, Dylan Gabriel, who you spent like a 3rd-round pick on, give him the job, and if they both struggle, then let Talon Green run wild. To me, Tom, this is Watson should be dead last on this depth chart.
It really should be. And I keep imagining a world where, what if Arch Manning didn't exist? What happens if there was no strong quarterback? They weren't positioning themselves to try and get him. You have a young running back in Quinshon Judkins. You have a tight end in Harold Fanden, who I think is pretty darn good. You drafted a wide receiver in Casey Knepschen. Wouldn't you want the quarterback who presumably would grow with them all? Wouldn't you want them getting as many reps as possible? Win or lose, make the playoff, be terrible, have 2 wins. Wouldn't you want them all growing together at the same time and then see what you have, in the totality of your offense? That's what it should be.
even if Shador, but Tom, it's a good point. Let's say Arch doesn't come out. People don't like the quarterbacks. The Browns have the first pick. Guess what? People have been saying that Jeremiah Smith, he's God's gift to football for 3 years now. And he goes to Ohio State. It's a pretty good consolation prize. This team cannot be this dumb. They cannot be. No, you cannot be a professional organization. They just did a good job. We all said it with the Myles Garrett trade. You got Watson, it's like minus 200 to start the job. Can't happen. See you next time. Pro Football Today.